Mr. Speaker, today can be considered permission to speak from a seat other than mine, Mr. Speaker.
You may go ahead.
Mr. Speaker, today can be considered one of the most important days of my life. Many people, Mr. Speaker, dream of becoming millionaires. Many dreams of other things that they consider to be important in their lives. But, Mr. Speaker, my dreams, Mr. Speaker, was built on these words: heights of simple men, reached and kept, were not attained by sudden flights, but they, while their companions slept, was toiling upwards through the night. Mr. Speaker, Desmond, Mr. Speaker, there is so much.
But I wish to hear the minister's presentation to me.
There is so much, Mr. Speaker, to give God thanks for, Mr. Speaker. It would be easy just to say thanks to the Almighty and take my seat. But, Mr. Speaker, I want to spend a few minutes acknowledging a number of persons. First of all, Mr. Speaker, let me congratulate you on your elevation to the position of Speaker. Your long political record speaks for itself both at the level of the trade union movement and your election as a councillor of the KSAC back in the 60s. Congratulations to you, Mr. Speaker. To my political colleagues on both sides of this honorable chamber, we continue to share a good bond of friendship. Despite, Mr. Speaker, sometimes we surpass our expectations. But at the end, Mr. Speaker, it is done in good faith while we still observe and respect our political differences. The most honorable Prime Minister, the Honorable Andrew Holness, is easily, Mr. Speaker, the most improved and dynamic political leader that the Caribbean have seen for the last 20 years. His vision for Jamaica has made him a champion of this new political dispensation that the political landscape of Jamaica long has been calling for. It has been an honor, Mr. Speaker, to work and support his efforts both at the level of the party and at the national level. I think, Mr. Speaker, that the people of Jamaica have invested in a leader that stands tall above the rest, and I wish that God will continue to give him the strength and the courage to build on the foundation that he has started. I want to thank him, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity extended to me to be working closely with him in a very important ministry as the Ministry of Local Government and Community Development. I want to say a special word, Mr. Speaker, as it relates to the most honorable Edward Philip George Seaga, who gave me the foundation on which I started out on. It is with pride that I again reflect on my over 50 years of association with this great man. And I want to say from the depths of my heart to the most honorable Edward Seaga, thank you for giving me this opportunity. to my personal staff, Mr. Speaker, to my executive assistants, Ms. Susan Wilson, my special assistant, Jacqueline King, my constituency executive, my councillors, Mr. Speaker, and the ever faithful, ever sure, ever committed people of Western Kingston. Words, Mr. Speaker, cannot express how I feel. I look forward to many years of association with the people of West Kingston in working to change the face of West Kingston and make their lives better, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the people of West Kingston for their continuous support. Mr. Speaker, yes, it's that will soon come. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Local Government, headed by the Permanent Secretary, Mr. Speaker, has opened their arms and have embraced me, Mr. Speaker. I was touched yesterday, Mr. Speaker, when I was presented with a gift by the staff of the Ministry of Local Government and Community Development for Father's Day. And that gift, Mr. Speaker, was signed by almost every single employee of the Ministry of Local Government. And I want to say to them how much, Mr. Speaker, I appreciate, respect, and honor the service that we have developed. And, Mr. Speaker, I can assure them of my continued support to their endeavors. A portrait of me. Mr. Speaker, I must say, Mr. Speaker, I must give thanks, Mr. Speaker, to my partner, my friend, my sister, my comfort, my strength, Mr. Speaker. I make reference of none other than my wife of 38 years, Marcia McKenzie. My friend, sister, companion, everything, Mr. Speaker. She's more than a wife, Mr. Speaker. She's more than a companion. She's all that I need, Mr. Speaker. My son and my daughter is present here, Mr. Speaker, and I know that my son in London is watching keenly to this presentation. I could not leave without saying my pride in young Marquis, my grandson, and his mother is here in the gallery. Mr. Speaker, the findings of the Commission of Inquiry into the unfortunate incident in West Kingston in May 2010. The report, Mr. Speaker, is a welcome relief to the people of West Kingston. While it may not erase the memories and wash away the blood stains, and most importantly, replace the lives of those who have died, and also importantly, Mr. Speaker, replace the dignity of the people of West Kingston. There is much to be thankful for coming out of the report. Mr. Speaker, I don't intend to say much on this matter because as a member of the subcommittee of cabinet, we intend to meet with the leadership of West Kingston. I've invited the government to meet with the people, to sit with them, Mr. Speaker, to look at the best way forward in implementing some of the recommendations that came out of the findings of the Commission of Inquiry, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Prime Minister, at the swearing of the Cabinet on March 7th, mentioned that national growth and development starts at the root. We intend, Mr. Speaker, not just to reform the structure of local government and to improve its efficiency and business process. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has set the tone for administration by stating the importance of partnership. The ministry continues to benefit from crucial partnerships within Jamaica as well with our bilateral and multilateral relationship, Mr. Speaker. We are grateful to all our partners, including the government of Japan, the United States, the Germans. And I must, Mr. Speaker, mention the gratitude of the ministry to the United States Agency for International Development, USAID, with whom we are working to implement a special project, the Jamaica Rural Economic Ecosystem Adapting Climate Change 2, otherwise called JAREACH 2. Through this 4-year project, the local authorities will benefit from strengthening their strategic planning, monitoring, and evaluation process. I must take this opportunity to publicly thank the outgoing head of USAID for her contribution to Jamaica and the work with the Ministry of Local Government. On behalf of the government and people of Jamaica, I thank her. Local government has been enriched by the work of your organization. Mr. Speaker, let me state categorically that we are on a mission to reform local government to the benefit of the public. Nothing less. Emerging from the recent published findings surrounding the Hanover Parish Council, I particularly take note of the call of some sections of the media for the shutting down of local government. Let me advise those detractors, Mr. Speaker, that this administration has no intention of shutting down local government. We are going to be strengthening local government to work on behalf of the people. We believe in local government. As a son of local government, Mr. Speaker, I serve as councillor and as mayor, and I acknowledge the presence of our worship Mayor, Senator Councillor Angela Brown-Burke. I know firsthand the positive impact that good representations can have on people's lives at the community level. Local government touch the lives in a real way, every day, whether it is run badly or whether it is run good, Mr. Speaker. I will use my talent, experience, and collective talents of partners within Jamaica and internationally to make local government an efficient, accountable organ to serve every single Jamaican. Let me admit, Mr. Speaker, that the image of local government and that of the local authorities have been shaken and battered by very serious revelations in the special report from the Contractor General, which have been tabled in this honourable House. The public is aware of the steps that have been taken. There are clear signals, Mr. Speaker, that this administration, this minister, will not stand aside and allow breaches of public trust to occur under the banner of autonomy. The local authorities are accountable to the minister under the law. I intend to lift the standard of accountability and the service that are provided. We intend, Mr. Speaker, to audit all local authorities to ensure that the appropriate systems are implemented to make them significantly more efficient and accountable. We intend, Mr. Speaker, to restore true meaning to the word authority to local government so that the system of local governance can regain credibility in the eyes of the Jamaican people. It is not an easy objective, Mr. Speaker, to me. It requires time and resources, but it must be done, and I'm committed to achieving those objectives, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I have just received the audit that was conducted by the ministry on the Hanover Parish Council. It is being reviewed, Mr. Speaker. But I want to advise this honourable House that our drive is to increase accountability. We have established a land divestment committee which is responsible for ensuring that the sale and lease of the local authorities is done in a manner that is prescribed by law. In short order, Mr. Speaker, we'll be establishing an auditing committee in the local authorities. We will begin the process of developing a standard operation procedure to ensure seamless and accountability in the management of their public responsibilities. At the same time, we'll be improving the institutional capacity to the local authorities by introducing a training risk-based auditing curriculum which has already been developed. Mr. Speaker, and beginning this August, the auditors in the local authorities will experience training on a regional basis. This will facilitate a more robust system of quarterly reporting that will be required by the local authorities. Mr. Speaker, we'll be approaching the Office of the Contractor General to assist us in developing an highly efficient system of procurement for the local authorities. We are serious about enforcing the existing procurement and financial rules. And Mr. Speaker, I am making it clear, the Ministry of Local Government will not release any funding to the local authorities unless the rules are observed in how the local authorities receive funding from the Ministry of Local Government. Mr. Speaker, I know that with some of the initiatives that we are putting in place, there are going to be concerns raised, Mr. Speaker. In that regard, I have written to the General Secretary of the Jamaica Association of Local Government Officers, JALGO, Mrs. Eileen Davis White, and the President of the Association of Local Government Authorities, Mayor Sian Barneswell, to meet with me and a team at the Ministry to discuss the issue involving the concerns of local government and to work in a spirit of partnership to bring a different face to the Ministry of Local Government. Mr. Speaker, the national awareness is critical in the fight against corruption, and so the Ministry will be implementing a number of public education programs, Mr. Speaker, to assist the public in understanding how local government work when it comes on to the collection of fees. Mr. Speaker, we know that a certain event is coming, and people have been talking about it. They have asked the Prime Minister about it. The opposition have been speaking about it. All I'm prepared to say about that, Mr. Speaker, is that this administration and this government needs at least 10 years, Mr. Speaker, to fully reform and to put in place the programs that are required to change local government. At the level of central government, Mr. Speaker, we are working smartly, diligently, to bring prosperity to the Jamaican people. At the local government level, we are already showing our seriousness about shaking up things for positive results. Whenever this widely anticipated event is announced by the Prime Minister, I am ready to make the case. The confidence expressed by the electorates in this government to manage central government, it should be invested in us to complete the circle to make us properly take care of the people of Jamaica with their business at the level of local government, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, the hurricane season is upon us, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Management is ready for whatever challenge is faced by the country. This readiness is due to the hard work of the agency staff, but also, Mr. Speaker, because of the strong cultural and interagency collaborations between partnership maintained here and overseas. Mr. Speaker, the government has invested a lot, Mr. Speaker. My friend, the former minister, after I had some discussions with him, put out a release. I want to respond to that quickly. The Ministry of Local Government, Mr. Speaker, advised the parish councils in May of the standard tradition that funds made available to the parish council for May and June must be used for mitigation purposes in preparation for the hurricane season.
That's true.
So there's no need for the minister to put out a statement calling on me to say something. The next thing I'm going to say, that $250 million will be made available in phase 1 of the drain cleaning exercise for critical drains across the country as soon as all the submissions from the parish councils have been received. Then we will start to disperse the funds accordingly, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, at least, Mr. Speaker, our preparedness for disaster readiness, Mr. Speaker, is well on its way. Mr. Speaker, I want to turn quickly now, Mr. Speaker, to the Social Development Commission. It has been in the news, Mr. Speaker, and I just want to advise this Honourable House. I've had discussions with the chairman of the CDF committee on this outstanding issue. And a meeting with a member from Southwest St. Catherine has been planned for next week, where we will discuss the issues surrounding the SDC and the fees which have been of great concern to members of Parliament, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Social Development Commission continues, Mr. Speaker, to be one of the driving forces in the Ministry of Local Government. Mr. Speaker, the SDC has been undertaking projects right across the country. 182 local economic development initiatives valued at over $615 million, supported by the Local Economic Development Support Program, which, Mr. Speaker, has created over 1,000 jobs, Mr. Speaker. Additionally, 87 community projects were implemented at a value of $368 million, Mr. Speaker. And as I speak, Mr. Speaker, for the last 6 years, the Social Development Commission got zero funding in the budget, Mr. Speaker.
What?
I am pleased to announce that in this year's expenditure, this government, this prosperity government, has provided a working capital for the Social Development Commission for the first time in many years, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker.
For the first time at last.
Mr. Speaker.
For the first time at
Much more than you gave. You gave zero. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, community development is an important aspect of this ministry's trust, Mr. Speaker. In this financial year, Mr. Speaker, 3 community parks will be established, 1 in St. Andrew, 1 in St. Catherine, and 1 in Trelawney, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we believe in community development, and we are working assiduously to ensure that that is done. Mr. Speaker, I want to turn to the social, that will come shortly. I want to turn to the social protection program, Mr. Speaker. As we work to make Jamaica, as we work to make prosperity a reality for the Jamaican people, we must remember those who are less fortunate, those who we have to take care of, Mr. Speaker, especially those Jamaicans who live in the infirmaries across the country. Quite frankly, Mr. Speaker, the infirmary in Santa Cruz and in Lucy is in outstanding condition, and I want to commend the staff for that, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we intend to address seriously challenges to the infirmary by focusing on infrastructure development. So in that regard, $135 million will be spent on building new wards at Manchester and Portland Infirmary commencing in this financial year. These funds, Mr. Speaker, will not come from the consolidated fund. It will be taken out of funds from the Ministry of Local Government, so it will not be a charge on the budget of central government. The male and female wards, the equalization and property taxes. The male and female wards at the Portland Infirmary, Mr. Speaker, will be designed to house 55 residents in a private home setting, Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, these facilities will be equipped with the latest technology, solar power, LED lighting, Mr. Speaker, and every facility that will give comfort, Mr. Speaker, to those persons. Mr. Speaker, the female ward in Manchester will cost roughly $55 million, Mr. Speaker, and we'll be also, Mr. Speaker, spending some $25 million more on the Santa Cruz Infirmary for the renovation of the administrative office, MP, and also to put in a solar water heating system in the infirmary. Mr. Speaker, our commitment, Mr. Speaker, is to improve the conditions. Mr. Speaker, work, Mr. Speaker, will also commence on a number of parish council buildings across the island, Mr. Speaker. The Portmore Municipal Building has now been approved by the National Contracts Committee, Mr. Speaker. I wish to also announce, Mr. Speaker, that the Westmoreland Parish Council building is now 50% complete, Mr. Speaker. We are well aware of the concerns at other parish council buildings, and Mr. Speaker, we'll be turning our attention as soon as we are in a position to look at the situation at the St. Thomas and the St. Anne Parish Council. Mr. Speaker, we have been long concerned about the welfare of people who are treated at our public hospital. Yes. There's an arrangement that the Minister of Health, when he speaks, will outline a partnership between the Ministry of Local Government and the Ministry of Health as it relates to persons, Mr. Speaker, who are discharged from the hospital, have nowhere to go. There's a partnership, and the Minister of Health will speak to that very shortly, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the question of property taxes. It is the largest contributing source of revenue to the local authorities. And I want to make it quite clear, Mr. Speaker, that this administration has no intention of increasing property taxes. Mr. Speaker, the government is making the payment of property taxes easier. The government, Mr. Speaker, working in collaboration with Tax Administration of Jamaica, will be rolling out very shortly 2 taxmobiles. 2 taxmobiles will be rolled out in this financial year that will make the payment of property taxes much easier, Mr. Speaker.
Working Minister. Oh, man,
you started it. You weren't able to complete it. I am the finisher, and I'm going to be finishing it, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, trade license again, another source of income to the parish councils, Mr. Speaker. We are going to be strengthening the parish councils, Mr. Speaker, putting in the necessary mechanisms to ensure that the parish councils are in a better position to collect trade license, Mr. Speaker.
Hear, hear.
What it means, therefore, Mr. Speaker, is that the enforcement arm has to be strengthened.
Yes.
Some 33 new municipal officers graduated quite recently, Mr. Speaker, and an additional 50 more, Mr. Speaker, will be put under training at the police academy so that we will be in a position, Mr. Speaker, to offer the critical services that the parish council required. Mr. Speaker, one of the roles of the municipal police officers is the question of littering, Mr. Speaker. And as soon as we have completed the review of the Litter Act, and as soon as all those things, Mr. Speaker, has been put in place, I will be coming back to Parliament to outline the government's new trust as we fight the litterbuggers in Jamaica, Mr. Speaker. Let us turn quickly, Mr. Speaker, to markets. Let us turn quickly to markets, Mr. Speaker. Markets play a very important role in the lives of the country, Mr. Speaker. The Coronation Market and the Oxford Mall, which is situated in my constituency, is an example of what markets can do for the country, Mr. Speaker. We'll be continuing the work on the infrastructure.
Members, I wish to hear the Minister's presentation to the Speaker, and I will ask to allow him to do so with you being silent.
Mr. Speaker, in this financial year, the administration will be focusing on 3 markets: Buff Bay, Portland, and we'll be completing the work that was started on the Clarkstown market in Trelawney. The new Buff Bay market, Mr. Speaker, is expected to be upgraded to improve its capacity, not just for vendors, but for shoppers, Mr. Speaker. And we are going to be making an effort to put in the necessary energy-saving apparatus, Mr. Speaker, to make the market viable. When completed, the new Buff Bay market will produce accommodation for 100 vendors. And those vendors in return, Mr. Speaker, will touch communities such as Buff Bay, Shirley Castle, and Oak Bay. Modern stalls, proper color coding, zoning of the market areas, low renewable energy such as LDD lighting and solar panel, Mr. Speaker, water harvesting and modern bathroom and shower facilities will also be provided. The new market in Port Maria, Mr. Speaker.
Yes. Yes.
The government will be spending an estimated $40 million on the new Port Maria market. This will be a 2-story facility.
Yes.
Built, built at the same location at the present market, Mr. Speaker. And it will not only provide space for vendors, but also for persons who want to do business can operate the top floor. And I know the minister welcomes that.
Yes, sir. Long time we had the planner ask that way.
Mr. Speaker, we'll also be looking at the Papine,
listen to achievement,
Otrios, and the Santa Cruz market for development, Mr. Speaker. And I know the member from St. Anne is pleased to hear that the Otrios market, and the member from Eastern about the Papine market. Mr. Speaker, we are good friends, and he knows. Mr. Speaker, I want to turn now to the National Solid Waste Management Authority.
Not yet.
This is a critical agency of government, Mr. Speaker. And this administration is committed, Mr. Speaker, to bring transformation into 2 vital areas of governance and service delivery. On the strength of improvements made by the board appointed after the Riverton City fire last year, we have decided on a course of continuity. Accordingly, Mr. Speaker, we have invited Mr. Dennis Chung to continue to head the board, and I want to thank Mr. Chung for the work that he has done in the past and the work that he will continue to do, and those members who have been serving on the board, Mr. Speaker. As we await the findings of the Office of the Contractor General, Mr. Speaker, I have asked the board to carry out a forensic audit, and the country will be advised as soon as that audit has been completed. The MSWMA is working to improve the infrastructure at the facilities, and I want to thank the government of Mexico and the United Nations Office for Project Services, who has been working on the Riverton City main road, and I want to also say a special word to the residents of Riverton City for working and assisting, and the program is working on time without any problems. Mr. Speaker, the last administration provided funds to purchase new trucks. There has been some problems with those trucks. Finally, Mr. Speaker, we have been working to correct it, Mr. Speaker. This administration, in this year's estimate, has provided an additional $250 million, and the process has started in securing the trucks, Mr. Speaker, and I want to assure the country, I know that there have been serious complaints from right across Jamaica as it relates to the non-collection of garbage, and I would ask the country to bear with us while we try to put in place the necessary steps to deal with the backlog of garbage, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to mention the question of a national cleanup program that was started a couple of months ago. This program, Mr. Speaker, has been progressing exceptionally well, both in terms of public cleansing and the elevation of public awareness. The Most Honorable Prime Minister established a task force spearheaded by this ministry to urgently address Jamaica's state of cleanliness, particularly with regards to the imminent threat of the Zika virus. Three components of the program are removal of bulky waste, community mobilization through house-to-house surveillance, search and destruction of mosquito breeding sites, and public education and behavioral changes, Mr. Speaker, through communication. I want to thank our partners, the Ministry of Health, the National Works Agency, the Jamaica Constabulary Force, and the Jamaica Defense Force, who have been actively engaged in the supervision and removal of household bulky waste and the public education aspects of the program. I must commend also, Mr. Speaker, the Social Development Commission, ADPEM, and the Jamaica Fire Brigade for the work that they are doing in support of this program. We started in St. James in April. We went to Portland, and earlier this month, we were in the constituency of the Honorable Prime Minister, and I will be meeting shortly with the leader of the opposition as we take the exercise into our constituency, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we are clearing the spaces. We are changing the face of the country. People are coming out, learning, participating, and I'm very pleased and highly encouraged by what I'm seeing from the Jamaican people in response to this program. We have seen, Mr. Speaker, a revival of great civic pride, and we will be doing everything in our powers to make this work and to make the Jamaican people feel proud of this program, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to turn now to the Jamaica Fire Brigade. This government places on record its gratitude to the men and women of the Jamaica Fire Brigade. They have been providing building inspection services, community education programs. They are called to accident scenes, and of course, they have to deal with fires. Arising out of the unfortunate incident last August, in which 3 firefighters were injured in Olympic Gardens, I am glad to know, Mr. Speaker, and to advise this Honourable House that Lance Corporal Andre Jones, firefighter Tennessee McFarlane, and District Officer Sigmund Sutherland continue to recover from their ordeals, and I want to express to the fire department and to the family the appreciation of the government and people of Jamaica and wish them well in their recovery. Mr. Speaker, everything is being done to make the Jamaica Fire Brigade into a viable organization. This year, Mr. Speaker, the fire service will receive new trucks, all the necessary equipments that are required, Mr. Speaker, to make them worthy of the job that they are doing. And I see the commissioner over there, and I know the pain and the anger that the commissioner faces whenever something goes wrong with a member of his department. Mr. Speaker, many agencies have been working with the fire service, Mr. Speaker. And the Jamaica Disaster Vulnerability Reduction Project has also contributed significantly to the stock of resources that is required by our firefighting personnel, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to announce that the Fire Brigade will begin construction on 2 new fire stations starting this financial year. One in Port Maria in St. Mary and the one in the second city, Montego Bay. In the next financial year, Mr. Speaker, we intend in focusing on the new facility in Yalas in St. Thomas. And to commence this work, Mr. Speaker, because both St. Mary and Montego Bay has been without fire station for the last 7 years. Mr. Speaker, the new board has been tasked with the responsibility in finding new accommodation to house the head offices of the Jamaica Fire Brigade. And Mr. Speaker, I want again to commend the Fire Brigade, Mr. Speaker. 105 new firefighters was added to the list of Jamaica's firefighting apparatus, Mr. Speaker, and they are going to be training in this financial year 100 more firefighters, Mr. Speaker. At the end of that training, it will bring the complement of firefighters up to a level where there will only be short of 60 firefighters to complete the full complement of the fire service, Mr. Speaker. The trucks are coming, fireboats are coming. Mr. Speaker, I want to now turn quickly to street lights. Mr. Speaker, the country continues to experience grave problems with street lights right across Jamaica. It is a concern that is shared by almost every Jamaican, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, especially in many inner-city communities. Mr. Speaker, we have commenced dialogue with the Jamaica Public Service Company. I will admit, Mr. Speaker, that the government of Jamaica owes the Jamaica Public Service Company in excess of $3 billion.
4 years, no.
This government, since I assumed the ministry, have paid $500 million to the Jamaica Public Service Company. These discussions, Mr. Speaker, will only come to the benefit of the Jamaican people. It is important, Mr. Speaker, that we develop an understanding with the Jamaica Public Service Company, because the country cannot afford the burden of the streetlight bills, Mr. Speaker, and there are concerns, and these concerns must be ironed out, Mr. Speaker, as we chart the way forward. Oh, not do like you.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the member's time be extended by 5 minutes to allow him to conclude his presentation.
The question is that the minister's time be extended by 5 minutes. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes of it. Minister McKenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I just want to say quickly on the question of the building bill, Mr. Speaker. The bills, Mr. Speaker, were laid on the table of the last Parliament. It was laid at a time when they knew that they were going to an election. And the bill fell off the other table.
Bill wasn't even complete.
Mr. Speaker, the bill, Mr. Speaker, needs serious revision.
It wasn't complete.
Even some of the parish councils, Mr. Speaker, that has a role to play, had no input in the bills, Mr. Speaker.
Sure.
We have already, Mr. Speaker, started consultations with the various stakeholders in the building industry and other interest groups, Mr. Speaker. And as soon as those consultations are completed, Mr. Speaker, it will go to the legislation committee and then it will be presented to the Parliament, Mr. Speaker. Now, Mr. Speaker, I want to, Mr. Speaker, also mention, Mr. Speaker, that discussions have started with myself and the Minister with responsibility for water on the question of minor water supply, Mr. Speaker. This government gave a commitment to the people of Jamaica that we will give them water, Mr. Speaker. This is a commitment that we made on the political platform, and it is a commitment that we are going to be living up to, Mr. Speaker. And when the Minister of Water speaks, Mr. Speaker, again, this is a partnership between the Ministry of Local Government and the Ministry of Water. Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, Mr. Speaker, this ministry has been confronted with a wide range of challenges. Yes. And before I conclude, Mr. Speaker, the Mayor of Kingston is here. And I want to commend her and the KCC for having entered the Bloomberg City competition. And they have been nominated in the top 20 cities across the world. They are vying for $5 million, Mr. Speaker.
Prosperity.
It is a part of the prosperity agenda, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, to assure Her Worship that the Ministry of Local Government and all the government agencies that will be required to assist the city of Kingston in winning that $5 million, we are committed, Mr. Speaker. Prosperity speaks, prosperity talk, prosperity is going to put the money where the mouth is. Mr. Speaker, we are faced with challenges, Mr. Speaker. With good sense, with creativity and integrity, we are doing so not merely to put out fire here and there. We are doing it in furtherance of a better life that every Jamaican desires. In other words, Mr. Speaker, we are working diligently through local government system to aggressively tilt the balance of life towards prosperity. That is why we have restored the budget of the Social Development Commission as it worked to generate over 4,500 jobs this financial year. That is why we are not just cleaning public spaces through the MSWMA and providing new garbage trucks, but we are also using the National Cleanup Program to rekindle public pride and to help to give our people an attitude of prosperity. That is why we are investing in building and refurbishing of markets so that they can take their rightful place as critical hubs of economic expansion, development, and public order. That is why we are working night and day to transform the functioning image of the local authorities. Prosperity requires an environment of order and professionalism in order to strive. Mr. Speaker, we have done so in just over 107 days. There is much more to come. My pledge, Mr. Speaker, is that my mind, my energy will be devoted to the national development through the Ministry of Local Government and Community Development. When I look at my fellow citizens, from the young to the old, my mission is clear. It is to encourage community development through social activities. It is to ensure that we all live in a clean, garbage-free environment. It is to contribute to public safety by having functioning streetlights. It is to ensure that our vulnerable people are treated with dignity and sensitivity. Mr. Speaker, I have been truly lifted by the warmth and encouragement I have received from the Jamaican people as I traverse the country to make local government real to them. With their support, the support of the total ministry, and the blessings of the Almighty, I am confident that together we will bring prosperity not only to our children, but in our lifetime. Courage, brothers. Do not stumble, though your path be dark as night. There's a star to guide the humble. Trust in God and do the right. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.